Central Illinois Sports and the, what are we calling this program again?
I didn't know he had a name.
Ooh, we don't have a name yet. We're just two guys in a basement with a bright light and a backdrop. It's not catchy. But glad you're alongside here. Jack Hull, Charlie Hull. Week one of the high school football season is in the books. We'll talk a little bit about the games we saw. We'll also have an interview coming up a little bit later with Jerred Heinz, the athletic director at Pittsfield. He's also their junior high baseball coach. They're off to a nice start on their season, so we'll visit with him, get a little information on the PCS Braves. And we'll talk about some of the broadcasts we have coming up this week, Jack. We also, as always, encourage people to subscribe to that YouTube page, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Jack and I don't do Instagram, so we don't have one of those. Also, if you're looking for the audio-only broadcast that Jack is doing for the Camp Point Central broadcast, you will need to download the Mixler app, but it's available in your Google Store, on your Android, or on your Apple Store for your iPhone. Very, very easy to do that. It's a little. What does that look like? It's a box with.
It's a square with little white dots in the middle of it, and it's mixlr.com. And then all you have to do in the search bar is put in Geared Up Broadcasting, and it'll pop up. And if you will join that way it'll send you an email each and every week when we do a broadcast and tell you we're going on the air. And that way, if I decide to do some morning sports reports and different things like that, they'll come to you also. And so we hope you'll do that. But Charlie, you had you traveled to Riverton on Friday night. Last year, that was a big game for Pittsfield at home when it was Pittsfield and Griggsville Perry. This year, you saw the Pittsfield Sockies have a little adversity in the beginning. And tell us a little bit about how they had that happen and then they came back.
Well, it was an interesting start to the contest. Just when we walked in, it was so different from the last time that we were at Riverton with the people there. There was just a lot of positivity. A lot of fans were there early. They were cooking out. It was a really nice crowd and a new head coach and some excitement. And it's not saying anything against the old head coach. I think that just happens when you bring somebody new in. People are excited. It's a new beginning. And Paul Petty and I talked about it before the game when we did an interview earlier in the week. He said, I think this is going to be a different team. And for the first quarter, they were absolutely a different team. They start 8 or 9 sophomores on the offensive side of the ball, and a lot of those kids end up playing both ways. Their numbers are better, but still not great for a school that's a 2A, 3A borderline football school when it comes to the playoffs. But a lot of youngsters out there, and they were very confident in the early going. Pittsfield, as you talked about, didn't start well, but man, once they got their feet under them a little bit, they really rolled. Scored 40 straight points in the first half to up 40-14 at halftime. Jacob Freeman looked tremendous in the backfield. He got some really good blocking, especially on the right side of their line in their contest. And Paul Petty talked about 7 different guys, were competing for those positions. They all played on Friday night in and out to keep guys fresh and keep fresh bodies and on the field and ready to go. Freeman was getting good blocking on the leads they were running with Wade Howland at the fullback spot. And Freeman ended the first half, like I said, 170 yards, 3 touchdowns. Gage Gratton looked very good carrying the ball. He ended the game with just a little under 100 yards rushing. We saw Logan Howland carry the ball quite a bit in the contest. Colton Story came in and played fullback and got a touchdown run. The Sockies had 531, I do. Out only threw the ball 3 times. One was an interception. And, it was kind of interesting. In the third quarter, they set up a pass play, even though they were up by quite a bit, just to try to get him going a little bit, and he missed the receiver. And Coach Petty talked about it. He said, our offensive coordinator says, hey, you need to make that throw. He goes, and he does need to make that throw. But I also know what it's like being a sophomore playing quarterback at the varsity level and trying to make that throw. It's not easy. So overall, I thought Bobby Stout played with a lot of composure and did a very nice job helping manage the offense.
That's what I was going to ask. How was his game management? How were the handoffs? Were there many fumbles between that new quarterback and some of those new backs? And when he had an opportunity to keep the ball himself, I don't know whether he did. I got a chance to watch some of it. He's a big boy. He's going to be hard to bring down, too.
He is. He actually had a touchdown run that got negated because of a hold, but it was a really good read on an option to the left side, if memory serves me correctly. He went around the end, was gone, but they called it back because of a hold on the whiteout on that side. They didn't have any fumbles from the center quarterback exchange or the quarterback to running back exchange. The Sockies ran most of the night with a single whiteout, 10 guys in very closely. and it wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of up and down style of offense that you see a lot in football these days, but it got the job done. And I will say, some people said, well, is Riverton really bad, or did Pittsfield play well? I think Riverton is better than they were a year ago. I think they have better athletes. This young man that played fullback, Mr. Williams, holy cow, 6'2", 215 pounds, and I mean, if you were going to tackle him, you better bring some friends because he could really run it. But the Sockies ended up figuring that out a little bit. They have a nice left-handed quarterback, Jerred Heinz, I do believe was his name. He throws a good ball, and they had 4 sophomore wideouts. So I think that's a program that's on the rise. I think they're going to get better. The tough thing, Jack, is trying to turn a program like Riverton around in the Sangamo Conference is not the easiest thing in the world. You're going to be playing perennial powerhouses basically every week.
Well, and I think the big things that I heard was the Sockies are quicker. The Sockies are stronger because they did the work in the offseason. The Sockies tackled more in gang tackling. All those things were really big positives. The running game being that successful, will you have that much success against an Auburn? Probably not, because they've got like 10 or 12 kids that have played since their sophomore year. Some of the people from Auburn tell me that this may be one of the best football teams they've ever had. That's pretty high praise to say that because Auburn's had some good teams. But to build on this, now this next week, I think some of the goals for the Sockies are how many points they're going to allow and not to have a bunch of penalties, not to have a bunch of fumbles, shorten the game when you're playing somebody who's favored against you.
And, the penalty thing is something that Paul touched on a little bit in our post-game interview. He's Nate Anderson got called for a roughing. It wasn't roughing the passer. It was unsportsmanlike conduct. They said it was an illegal hit. From my perspective, it looked like a clean hit. They said, well, maybe he went head to head. And I know that they're trying to change, some of those things for safety purposes. I understand that. Mm-hmm. But I think, there's a good point that got brought up. Okay, well, what about when the fullback has the ball, when he lowers his head to initiate contact? That has to be just as dangerous. And it's funny because that actually is a rule in the NFL and has been for a couple of years. You never see it called on the running back, or as the ball carrier. It's always the defensive guy. So, I thought it was a clean hit. I don't want to referee high school football. I think it's very tough, and that was a good group. It was Travis Guess's group, actually, out of the Springfield area, and they do a really nice job. But I think that was tough. They had a couple silly penalties, on unsportsmanlike conduct. They roughed the passer once late in the third quarter, even though they were up. And just things, you can't do against better teams. And I think that, I think they'll come out with some better confidence against Auburn. But I think the big thing is when you get down 14-0 to a Riverton, a team that you beat last year, it's a little bit easier to say, hey, you know what, it's okay. We can still come back and do this. If, you get in a similar situation to Auburn, you can't then say, well, this one's over and pack it in. You got to keep fighting.
When you've been there before, like last week, that will help them in the future. And Coach can say to them, hey, you remember? We were in this situation before. How did we get the control of the game at that point? And will it be tough? Yeah, because quite honestly, Pittsfield's in one of the toughest 2A, 3A conferences in the state of Illinois. 6, 7 teams make the playoff consistently. And the next couple of weeks, they're at home. During the game or after the game, whatever the case might be, but come out to the home games and support them because how you get a program started again. Never forget that the 64 straight wins that happened in the 60s and early 70s, it started after the season before when they lost to Minden the last game of the season and then reeled off a bunch of wins. And this is a group of kids that have really dedicated themselves to start a winning tradition, to get more numbers out, which will cause lots of great things. And I like what Coach Petty's been talking about in the positives. They're working hard. They're doing a lot of the things that they haven't done in the past. And I think that's going to be a key to their success. But 7 o'clock on Friday night, they'll be playing Auburn in their home opener, and you'll have the broadcast. But we hope a lot of people will come to Glen C. Smith Field.
Yeah, it should be a great night. 7 o'clock start, as you talked about. The parents will be having their cookout, lots of things to do before the game, so hopefully bring everybody out. One thing I want to point out, I heard a comment from a semi-local media source that they were talking about the Pittsfield-Riverton game, and one of their people that was on their panel said, well, I have the game of the week. I'm covering Pittsfield and Riverton, and everybody kind of laughed about it. You know, it really ticks me off because Pittsfield is in the top 50 in the state of Illinois in wins. There's over 500 wins in program history. Riverton is a school that's had tremendous success athletically over the years. Just because a program or a couple of programs aren't very good, you know, I just don't understand belittling anybody like that. And, you know, it's just such a disrespectful thing. And, you know, here's what I want to, you know, remind people of. I can remember it wasn't too long ago that let's take Athens, for instance, who's a very good program right now. Athens was the whipping boy of everybody. I mean, Pittsfield went there and played them and beat them by 40 points. They didn't even know how many minutes were supposed to be on the clock before the game started. You saw a transformation, a Camp Point Central program. You know, you talked about everybody's schedule is for homecoming. Well, that was because they thought it was a win. It's not a win anymore. So, you know, never disrespect a program, never underestimate that opponent, and never forget that history is not everything, because you can't sit on that forever that you won 64 in a row. It doesn't do you a lot now, this many years later. But it's still important, and it still means that there are people that have a passion for the game and a passion for their team. And the last thing I would say on this is they're still high school kids. So, you know, if you have to, you know, make a joke to, I guess, you know, get yourself to feel good about what you do on making fun of a high school kids program, you know, this is sad. But I didn't appreciate that at all.
I love the W. They do a really nice job with that. But when somebody comes out and says somebody stinks, they're bad, they're awful, blah, 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 you know, first thing I'd want to say is, well, could you show me your stats when you played? We go back a lot of years ago. The Spoon River Conference was a great 2A football conference in 5A or 5 classes of football. You know why it disbanded? Because Havana was too good, and they beat everybody year after year. Pittsfield couldn't get in the conference for years and years because they were too good to get there. We've seen consistency out of Carthage pretty much, but when they started to get down, they caught a break. They included La Harpe and Dallas City and became Illini West because they were going to be weaker for a few years. So they caught a few breaks in that situation. The other night, they kind of got hammered by somebody, and it goes up and down. But I'll tell you, here's the deal. It's the best show in town. It's your kids. Show up and watch the game, support them, and encourage your young people to go out for all the sports that you can, because it is your high school. It is your community, and I think that's so important. I want to turn to the game that I covered with Andy Johnson the other night on mixlr.com on Geared Up Broadcasting and Central Illinois Sports. Camp Point Central played Greenfield Northwestern and head coach Joe Pinbrook. And Charlie, do you realize that was the third time they'd played each other in 4 weeks of football, basically, because they played each other in Week 8, they played each other in Week 10 of the playoffs, and then they played each other in the home opener for Camp Point Central. And all 3 games were at Camp Point Central. Because the WIVC, when it shifts, things change on where you play. So you would have thought this game would have went to Greenfield, which kind of helps a little bit, because that's a pretty cool place to play, and it's a home field advantage. Central came out in the beginning, and honestly, they scored because Brandon Rossmiller just absolutely broke it outside and got them down the field. And then Jackson Mueller took the ball in from 1 yard out. They missed their extra point, which Central really needs to work on, because the last couple of years they've had trouble with that. Led 6-0, but with about 2.5 minutes left in the first quarter, here came Mr. Landsaw and company and Denver Davenport and the Stewart boy and some others, and they took it right down the field. Well, not really quite down the field. Panthers fumbled on the 9-yard line, so Greenfield Northwestern had a short field, took it in, missed their extra point, and they kick. And then the Panthers and them would go to the end of the first quarter at 6-6. The Panthers would score again before half and take a 12-6 lead, but over and over again, both defenses traded back and forth. And, folks, I'm going to tell you what, if you're playing the Tigers of Greenfield Northwestern this week or the rest of the season, you're going to find out they're pretty darn good, and they play great defense. And as the Landsaw really throws the ball well. He's a junior that's in his second year of varsity, played a little bit even as a freshman. Pinbrook boy, Davenport, and all those guys are really doing good. And they have got a huge fullback, kid that's about 6'3", and about 220, and you're not going to tackle him with one guy, so you better be pretty good at it. The Panthers struggled, but at the end they got lucky, you might say, because Greenfield Northwestern on their own 45-yard line with 7:31 left in the game went for a double reverse a counter play, and on the second handoff they fumbled the ball. The Panthers fell on it because their defense is very aggressive, and took the ball down and scored again. Brandon Rossmiller on a 4th and 7 from the 20. But you heard him a lot on offense, but you heard Jackson Mueller on defense on almost every tackle. I'm telling you, this kid was all over the field. Clayton Bowler also had a great game at linebacker. The young kids are playing pretty well. They're learning their roles. Blake Eiler, the new quarterback, did a nice job getting the ball. He had a few times he had trouble getting the ball from the center, new quarterback, 6'3" quarterback, one of the biggest ones they've had. But the Panthers' defense played really well, and they come away with a 20-6 win. And now this week, they head to West Central to take on a very hungry Matt Coldis squad who lost 14-13 to Route last week in a barn burner. And apparently they were about a foot and a half away from tying that game up or take it. In fact, they went for 2, I do believe, and or they would have won the game. So they're going to be hungry, and a pretty good rivalry there, and we'll be there to bring it to you. I think they start at 7:30, but we'll tell you a little bit later. They changed that, I think, a year or two ago, them and North Green, but we'll double-check on that and pay attention to our post so we can find out about that. But pretty good games there. As we look at, some other things that happened, Beardstown went down to Calhoun and got the win, piled up a lot of yardage. And I think the Calhoun squad still fought very hard in that game. And so, Beardstown's going to be tough to handle. This week they've got a North Green team who got the win over Triopia pretty handily. And we expected that. And, Donnie Allen's had a little bit more than a year to coach these kids where he only had a couple of weeks last year. He comes from North Mac, and he did a nice job. And so at Beardstown this week, it's North Green and them playing each other, and that ought to be a dandy. As we look at Concord Triopia, they will be at home against Calhoun squad. I think that's a flip of the coin game. You never know what's going to happen there. And then Jacksonville Route, like I said, got that win last week over West Central. Well, we're going to find out because they're going to be on the road against Greenfield Northwestern. I'm kind of picking Joey Pembroke's squad to get the win, but I guess we'll see what happens there. Pleasant Hill Western had a little bit of trouble with the Brown County squad, but they take on Minden Unity, who Carrollton handled 40-14, I do believe. It was a close game for a while on that one, so that ought to be a dandy game, and that will be at Pleasant Hill, and of course that always makes for a pretty good game. Then Carrollton and Brown County this week at Carrollton, the Battle of the Green, and that ought to be a dandy. Now the Brown County people are saying that, boy, this team is really ready to go. I still think they're really young. I think, Steve Surratt, who does their broadcast on bchornets.com on MixLR, said, oh, Jack, they just come from every angle. And I said, I agree, they do. Great young quarterback in the Fullerton boy. But this will be a good testing ground for them because Hunter Flowers can flat throw the football and he can run the football, and Carrollton proved they could run the football a lot last week against Minden.
Well, I think Brown County has good athletes. I mean, I think they really do. I think Fullerton's a tremendous athlete. Nathan Hendricker coming out and playing football. I mean, they've got the athletes to play athlete for athlete against Carrollton, but Carrollton's kids, and it just seems like Nick Flowers' team just reloads every year. And Brown County, I mean, it's kind of hard to believe. I was actually just looking on your screen as you were going over that. I'd sort of forgotten they were 2-7 last year. I mean, that was, quite honestly.
They lost to North Green the last game of the season. North Green's only win.
Right.
And
but, you take a look at that, and Tom Little's program is not used to having that type of season. They've been very, very good since he's been there and have been toward the top of the WIBC year in and year out, very competitive, had some tremendous teams, late 2000s. Who lost to Tuscola a couple times late in the postseason. So that's a program that's pretty used to winning. So, I think it'll be a good game with them in Carrollton. It'll be, dependent on how they do against the pass. Carrollton's really, really good in that spread, and Hunter Flowers can flat out throw the football. I mean, he's very good.
Doesn't have Nathan Walker anymore, who was unbelievable, an all-stater in every aspect of the game, but he's finding some other guys to throw it to. Hey, Quincy Notre Dame got the win over Lexington, who they lost to last year. That's Lexington, Missouri, over by Kansas City. Julie Ross, who works with me with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, that's her alma mater, so she was anxious to see a lot of those people. They'll be taking on Rock Island Alleman at home this week. And how interesting is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 home games in a row for Q&D with Lexington, Rock Island Alleman, Peoria High School, which will be a tough one, and West Hancock, who ran into a buzzsaw, before they go on the road against Granite City, Breeze Mater Dei, and Macomb, have a home game against Alton Marquette on October 18th. Now on the road at Richmond Burton, which I'm telling you, this might be the toughest schedule Quincy Notre Dame's had.
Well, it is a tough schedule, and it's kind of strange because, you hear a couple of you had Alleman in there, who is a Western Big Six school, right? Peoria High School
who's got the big guy who came over from Richwoods after they closed, and remember they got like second in the state a couple of years ago.
I mean, they're a school that has 1,400 kids probably in it.
Probably.
So that's a pretty big difference for them in Quincy Notre Dame as far as enrollment goes. And then 4 games in a row to start the season at home. You go, man, that's a really good deal. Until all of a sudden you start looking at, if you're needing a win late in the year, you'd much rather be at home later. So if it was flip-flop, I think it'd be a little different. But it kind of is what it is. And I don't envy the athletic directors at Quincy Notre Dame, Macomb, West Hancock, who are having to go all over God's green earth to find football games. And I think that's why the district format, when it comes in 2021, is going to be very, very good if it happens.
It's going to happen in some capacity, I do believe, but I think there's going to be another vote on it before it happens. Quincy High School ran all over Chicago North Lawndale, who must be a lot better at basketball.
74-0.
Yeah, but now they're going to play Alton on the road, and that's always a tough test. But Rick Little has done a tremendous job, a team that was 7-3 last year. If anybody's done a better job than Rick Little, name them, to rebuild a program that, quite honestly, never had much of a program ever before.
They've never won a playoff game.
Yeah, of course, they played East St. Louis every time they played one, it seemed like, in the past. But, you got to give them a lot of credit on that end of things. You take a look, last week, Macomb got handled by a Charleston squad who didn't win, I don't think, a football game the year before. First thing I want to say is, how about Macomb? They had low numbers in football, put a brand-new turf on their field, and that bomber plane might be the sharpest emblem I've ever seen on a football field, and they have really dedicated that. And, folks, if you've ever thought about doing that, find a way to make it happen, because that's tremendous. They played Charleston last week. Canton wasn't as good last year, but what a good program. They're going to play them this week, and they've got a tough schedule, too, to kind of try to handle. West Hancock played St. Peter's Lutheran, Missouri. I don't know who scheduled that one, but that was 70-something to nothing to it. This week, they're at home against St. Louis Carnahan, and I don't know one thing about them, but they've got a tough schedule, too, and they're going to look forward to the districts in the near future also.
They're playing 6 schools in Missouri. It's just tough because, they, Quincy, West Hancock, and Macomb are in a similar situation of geographically they're just not extremely close to other schools that are their size. And so therefore when you're not in a conference with the local folks, then you got to travel out and about a little bit more. So it's tough, but the district process will be much better for schools like that when it gets put in place. For
Macomb, for Pittsfield, I think it'll be good for a lot of people. I mean, West Hancock and Illini West not playing each other, that's just silly. I mean, they're 14 miles apart. Last week, Rushville played Monmouth United, and quite honestly, got behind, but then figured out a way. And they got this kid coaching that played at Carthage as a quarterback, and his dad's helping a little bit, who used to be the head coach at La Harpe Scioto. And you knew they were going to build that program back. And Rushville's had some good athletes.
Yeah, and I think they have some excitement behind that program once again. And Rushville is another program that has a very storied history on the football field, and what made the playoffs for 19, 20 straight years or something like that for a stretch. So that's a program that's used to winning, and they I think they've got a good coach in Brian Lafferty, a guy who, as you talked about, has been around the game of football for a very long time and has seen it played rather well.
And Rushville and Illini West are in that conference now that's got Knoxville, Farmington, pretty good programs. Scioto, West Prairie, Bushnell Prairie City, who struggled a little bit last week. Peoria Heights, Elmwood, Brimfield, that's always good. Havana, that's getting better. And Carthage, Illini West, and Rushville is always a good battle. And then Astoria, South Fulton. And we have to think about some of those schools that went to 8-man football, like I believe North Fulton did, if I'm not mistaken, and some others. So that's taken some people out of their lineup too. As you looked at things in the Sangamo last week, there was a little flip-flopping in some of those games. For instance, Porta got the 1-point win over Pleasant Plains.
Mm-hmm.
And, Porta was one of those teams we've always kind of competed with. So what's that tell you? Anything?
Well, I would say that Porta has a good group of athletes right now on the football field, and so I think they've been expected. This group's been coming for a while, and so they're finally here. Plains is a program that always has athletes. Last year they finished 7-4. I think they beat Beardstown actually in the first round of the playoffs.
And it kind of showed you a disparity in some things because a couple years ago, Beardstown was right on the cusp of beating Bloomington Central Catholic in the playoffs. And so this Beardstown squad was pretty good, but people will say, well, they play in that 1A, 2A conference, and so that hurts them. Well, maybe it does, but Plains showed you speed, the ability to pass, do some other things, and now Porta comes up and bites them and beats them like 18-17 the other night.
Yeah, I was on a few contests too, I do believe, in that one. So, yeah, an exciting game there. Williamsville won 27-12 over Athens. Really two very good programs, and Aaron Kuntz his program is just so impressive. Each and every year they went 10-2 last year. They just keep reloading, and you talk about a community that's gotten behind their program. Geographically, a lot of those schools get a pretty good pull out of the Springfield area of people, living in the smaller communities, working there, and they've used it to their advantage when it comes to the athletic side of things, because all these schools, it seems like, are very good. Also, let's see, I had that score just a moment ago. Auburn beat New Berlin 35-6, so a pretty good thumping there.
North Mac played Maroa pretty tough.
Yeah, they did, and I can find that for you in just a second. But I think the thing you see is, once again, New Berlin had a couple of years they were right in the top of that, fighting for the top of the conference. But it seems like the Sangamo at this point, as things stand today, Williamsville and Maroa are at the top until somebody else proves you differently. Then you have a next.
Now, North Mac a couple years ago ran the table.
They did.
And they were the big boys.
They did. Not consistently. They haven't done that. That next level is filled with Athens. North Mac is right in there. Auburn right in there, obviously. Pleasant Plains has been pretty consistent here as of late.
Right below them, I think.
And then you have, Riverton, Pittsfield, and Porta, who haven't been as competitive in the whole side of things. And I put New Berlin in that middle level. So, I think it's three pretty distinct levels of football at this point in time. But as we talked about, those things can change on a yearly basis. And you see sometimes them shuffle around a little bit. But it also makes you pretty awestruck on how consistent programs like Maroa Forsyth, enrollment of 386 kids, and Williamsville has got 400 and some, how they're able to put a product on the field that is so competitive each and every year. And you want to talk about facilities, you're talking about that Macomb facility. Maroa Forsyth has better facilities than some junior colleges when it comes to football. I mean, it's tremendous.
They in Mountain Zion have taken advantage of that 1% sales tax and going into the edges of Decatur, and they built tremendous facilities. Plains on a grass field. Some of these guys have really done a nice job on a grass field. It's kind of like Triopia and Camp Point Central and Brown County have done. Beardstown's got a nice facility. They're not turf, but they're pretty darn nice. And I think it's interesting because most of these now everybody says, well, Pittsfield's the little guy. Well, I think Pittsfield's the second smallest because Athens is actually the smallest. They're under 300 kids. They've got 296 in football enrollment this year. Pittsfield's about 335 or something like that, and I think they're going to grow a little bit in the next couple of years. But, competition-wise, there's no use to doing a lot of switching of conferences right now because when the districts come in, if they come in and when they come in, the conferences are going to be kind of immaterial. In fact, you may not be even playing most of those people in the conferences. Unfortunately, that's the one sad part. As good as the WIVC and the OCA and some of the northern ones have been, but I think the northern one's going to play the same people because they're all the same size anyway. So
yeah, and I think that's what you'll see with the WIVC to a point as well. I mean, you maybe won't see a Beardstown in that mix, but I think you'll see a lot of schools that end up playing a very similar schedule, even once the district once it gets implemented.
And you did notice that the water's still good in Lena Winslow. They played Lanark the first week, and
Well, did you see that Tuscaloosa and Arcola both won? And I mean, Arcola beat Argento Oriento, who you saw in the quarters or semis last year.
Semifinals, and they were a dandy team, and we're going to have quite a few guys back.
I mean, beat them like 42-6. So Arcola and Tuscaloosa are still doing it pretty well.
And one other thing I want to talk about, and that is taking care of business if you're on an athletic team. Because a year ago, Argenta played without their sitter because he got thrown out in the quarterfinals the week before. That hurts you. You don't want to lose a game like that, and you really want to make sure you know the training rules and are following those. And this isn't pointing out anybody in particular, but I'll tell you what, we need to really put a push on about all this vaping situation because it's really taken over in the high schools, a very, very dangerous thing, and we encourage all the kids, stay away from all that garbage. Let's enjoy the sports and the extracurriculars that you're doing in your high school years. You got plenty of time to make mistakes when you become an adult, how well I know.
High school volleyball is also underway. We got a chance, and we encourage you to watch the interview with Coach Jill Cook of the Pittsfield Lady Sockies volleyball head coach. They started their season with a tough loss to Southeastern, who's very, very good year in and year out on the volleyball court. But, it was funny. We talked a little bit about their, season last year and how well they started and how there was some excitement. And I said, and Coach, all of a sudden he looked up and there were people at games, and it's just not something you see all the time in that sport in particular in this area, unfortunately. But we definitely encourage people to get out, as you said, and support those kids when they can. But I think the Lady Sockies have some good athletes back and are ready to go. And I think the area outside of Quincy Notre Dame is down just a little bit when it comes to volleyball overall. So I think you're going to see some very competitive games. Obviously, you're going to get the Paysons of the world and the Southeasterns of the world who just have good programs.
And I think Camp Point Central, with a coach for the second year in a row, may come up a little bit. And I was trying to think. Rich Myers was at Liberty last year, but
I think he's at Minden now.
He's at Minden now, and he's had success pretty much everywhere. And Minden's had some good athletes over the year. And then you turn to golf. Right now, the boys and the girls both had a win over Carrollton, and they had some really. The white girl shot really well. The Petty girl had a good round in that one. On the boys' side, Kay Tomhaves pretty much led the way, but Hayden Gresham has been really performing well. TJ Reel has really had some nice scores putting it up, but it's all about consistency at this point in that. And then, of course, cross country will start on Saturday of this next week, and I think they go to Rochester, if I'm not mistaken. That's usually where they start things out. Yeah,
and Pittsfield's numbers on the cross country side are a little bit down, and that's kind of what you see in a school that has an enrollment, that's not very big. Is some years you have a lot in one area and not in another. When we talk with Jerred Heinz here in just a few moments, you'll hear him talk about he's got 30 kids out for junior high baseball, and people say, oh, is that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade? No, that's 7th and 8th grade. And if they had the 6th graders, there'd probably be another 14 or 15 kids in that mix. So, I mean, it's good to have numbers in that area, but that sometimes means that they're not playing something else. So that's why you want to keep encouraging everybody you can to stay out and play things as long as you can. And if it's something you don't enjoy, go try something else. There's always another opportunity to do that as well.
I know we saw the Virginia Triopia Meridosha Chambersburg junior high baseball team.
And some points in between.
And they have one young man from Meridosha Chambersburg. They hadn't had anybody since Russell Gregory. And now they've got a young man who's a 6th grader that's playing for them. A lot of Triopia kids, a lot of Virginia kids. And I think the other night, which one of the teams? Carthage. Now, that's not La Harpe and Dallas City and Carthage. This is just Carthage because La Harpe and Dallas City is another junior high. They told me total they had 39 kids out for baseball.
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, but 39 kids, and they do play youth football, I still think, up in Carthage. They kind of started a few years ago, and I think that's still going. And then, I'd be remiss not to say, hey, the junior high football program at Pittsfield played Carrollton a week ago, and then Calhoun this last week, and the older kids are dominant. In fact, the Carrollton folks told me they'd never seen a Pittsfield team that had a more dominant line, and the younger kids are learning to play too, so get out and support them. They play a lot of Wednesday night games, I think, don't they?
No, it's usually Saturdays
Do
now.
they?
Yep, usually on a Saturday these days, and yep, definitely fun to watch them. And I think that's, to kind of tie a bow on the whole conversation, about how things are kind of cyclical. I think you're going to see Pittsfield's football program, as long as they can keep the right kids interested and playing in the next couple of years, I think you're going to see a steady climb for that program.
Because somebody said, you got a bunch of big 8th graders. And I said, well, quite honestly, a lot of them are 7th graders. And most of the big kids are on the baseball team. So wait till they get to high school and start playing football too. As I've told your son, who's a 7th grader, plan on being like a back or a wide receiver. Just hide behind all those great big kids that are coming up in the future. But support the kids and really encourage them to do great things.
We're going to go to our interview now with Jerred Hines, head baseball coach for the junior high team at Pittsfield, also the athletic director for the Sockies, and we hope you enjoy the interview with Coach Hines. Welcome back on Central Illinois Sports. Glad to be joined now by head coach of the PCS Braves baseball team and athletic director at Pittsfield High School, Jerred Hines. Coach, how are we doing this evening?
Very good. How are you guys?
We're good, Coach. It's good to talk to you tonight. Your team, the PCS Braves junior high baseball team, you're off to a nice start. Let's talk about your season a little bit so far.
Yeah, well, we got 30 kids out this year. The biggest numbers we've had in the 5 years I've been doing this. Right now, we're at 7-2 on the season. We are hosting the regional this year. The teams that are in our regional, us obviously, Mount Sterling, Bluffs, Minden, Virginia, Camp Point. I think I covered everybody, but we're going to be hosting that regional this year, and we already got 2 big wins over regional teams, and we got another big one tomorrow against Camp Point. So we got the rest of this week, and then all of next week, and we start regionals after next week. So it's a quick season.
Coach, when you talk about having 30 kids, talk about what you had to do to prepare for this season. That's a lot of guys to try to get reps for. What have you been doing to help with that? Because you never want to run anyone away. Numbers are a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've been doing, big focus this year was to get some more coaches to help out with the numbers. That way we make sure the kids are getting the reps in practice. We have right now 4 coaches and a couple other coaches that are on staff that we can bring in if we need more help. But, we got Wade Smith, Brad Hamilton, newcomers this year, and obviously Coach Craven and myself are the main 4. And, it's great to have 4 coaches, and we're able to split kids up in 4 groups, and it's a better, coach-to-player ratio, and those kids are getting, as many reps as they can get, with those numbers. So it definitely takes a lot more planning out. Days that we want to hit, it's more complicated because that takes more time. So trying to get 30 kids in the cage, it's definitely a challenge. But we're doing the best we can, and we got good kids that are, willing to put forth the effort, at the same time have the patience to know that, you're only going to get so many reps, and you got to take advantage of every rep you get.
As the athletic director and the junior high baseball coach both, you probably really appreciate what Don Bigley is doing to prep the fields and get everything ready for you to take away that worry.
We were talking about it last week. I was talking with somebody, and it's such a nice thing to have. I remember having to take my preps to go out there, work on the field or try to get parents to come and help. And now, Don, he's just one call away, and he's out there, working on it. And obviously Don's been around baseball a lot through his years of coaching. And he knows when we can play and when we can. And sometimes he says, how bad do you want to play today? We're going to have to use a lot of bags of surface to get a game in. But he's been a asset for me to have. And both as an athletic director and as a coach, I know if we get rain overnight and we got some puddles, we're able to get good chance we're going to get to play because he's going to be out there getting it ready for us that next morning.
The junior high baseball season is, as you talked about, a quick one, and so you don't get a lot of days to practice, and actually this year you actually were able to start games a little bit earlier. So what do you do? How do you keep kids fresh and game ready, even though you don't have a chance to remedy maybe some of those mistakes you're seeing in games?
Well, the good thing is a lot of the kids, are maybe even the ones that aren't getting into that first game, we got the extra innings that we're playing. We actually picked up 4 B games this year that we're playing. In my last 4 years doing this, we've only had 1 B game in the last 4 years. So we were able to pick up 4 this year to get the kids, reps in game. Just you don't have a lot of practices. Once the season does start, you don't have a lot of time to go in and correct it, but you just try to do your best to teach them and put them in situations. And a lot of times in between innings, when they're coming off defensively, we'll meet before they come in the dugout, and you may see one of our coaches grab a kid and just talk to him about a situation, and you try to just be a quick lesson there for them to hopefully, if it was a mistake that they made, we're going to hit on, here's what you could have done differently, and hopefully they don't make the same mistake again. And again, that's a positive about having multiple coaches, multiple eyes on the kids, to help out and watch. And if they make a mistake, coaches will step up and talk to those players.
Coach Darren Craven really brings a lot of settling for your pitching staff. A very, very calm guy, as you are too, but he's able to grab that kid and take him off to the side and work with some of the other kids on what they need to do to improve their pitching situation. The last couple of years, that has been a tremendous blessing, I know.
Yeah, Darren keeps me cool at times too. There's a lot of times I'll get a little, on edge, the situation that is, it's, nerve-wracking situation that you're in, and Darren is always the level-headed one. He's cool, calm, and collected, but he does such a good job, and I've seen it this year when he took over the 8th grade basketball program. I was able to come in a couple of his practices, and it's the same demeanor he has. He talks very calmly to the kids, and they listen. And he has been a great asset to our program. I mean, it was by when he joined us, and it's been the best thing for the PCS Braves baseball program to add a coach like Darren Craven, and the kind of person he is. He just, he's got the kids' best interest, and he's made our program better all around.
Coach, a lot of this season is you having success because your pitching's been good, and that's another thing when you're playing as many games as you are in a short amount of time with the pitch count rules, which I think are a really good addition to junior high and high school baseball. But it's one of those things you definitely have to really manage who you're going to throw each day.
Yeah, and I trust Darren, Coach Craven, on that. I talked to him about what matchup, like this week we play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and 2 games Saturday. I let him pick out who the pitchers are and kind of just basically set out, he picks who the starters are that week for those games, and I just go with it because I trust him. Luckily, with having 30 kids, you're going to have arms, and there's going to be some kids that you're going to have to lean on a little bit more those weeks when you have so many games to pitch and eat up innings for us. And like I said, the nice thing of playing those extra inning games and having those B games, some of the kids that maybe wouldn't pitch as much in an A game for us, we're giving them opportunities to get on the mound, because you never know where you have a busy week and maybe a starter doesn't go as long for you. You have to put somebody out there to eat up some innings. We have the kids to be able to do that.
Talk about the leadership of the 8th graders. You had a lot of kids returning that played quite a bit last year, and the adjustment of the 7th graders who are in their first sport in school, where they really are having that day-to-day practice and the grind of that. How do you work the two of those together?
Well, we actually have 13 8th graders and 17 7th graders. The 8th graders, they're great leaders. Obviously, second year in the program, most of them. We with the 7th graders, with the starters, we usually DH somebody. We have about 10 kids that play total in the game. You got your 9 defensive players and then your DH. 5 of them are 7th graders, 5 of them are 8th graders. So it's a good split of those kids that are playing. And we got a lot of guys that come in, whether it be a courtesy run or a pinch run situation or even a defensive substitution. And we got a mix of 7th and 8th graders that do that as well. But it's, they really haven't missed the beat, those newcomers, those 7th graders, because they played so much baseball over the summer with travel ball. Even a lot of our 8th graders, several of them played on team. We do have some kids that didn't. But it's one of those things where, that's what's nice about the fall baseball, junior high baseball season, is that when these kids come in, they're already with midseason form. They've already been playing. Some of them have already played between 30 to 50 games during the summer. So this is just the halfway point for them. So they're most of them are pretty well. They're ready to go once the season begins, whether they're an 8th grader or a 7th grader.
I think we've talked before, and the fact that your purpose for junior high baseball is to help prepare kids to move on to that next level when it become high school players. But you're still looking to be competitive each and every day and win those games when you can. But it's one of those things of you've got to really make sure there's also good learning situations, and that sometimes means you sacrifice some games during the week. Maybe you pitch somebody else to say, hey, let's see what this kid does in a situation. It's not all necessarily about winning that game.
Yeah, you want to keep all those kids interested. With having 30 kids, it's a good problem to have. Like I said earlier, it does take a lot more planning and preparation for practices, but you want to keep as many of those kids interested and as many of them out as you can. And again, that's the reason why we've tried to pick up B games. Quincy Junior High, we played them last Saturday, and every year it's been 2A games. It's been a 2A game doubleheader. We play on that Saturday. This year, we just played the 1A game and then played the B game afterwards, played 5 innings. And again, trying to get every kid that went on the trip this last Saturday got in the game. And obviously, we want to keep those kids out. I know it's gonna happen. It happens every year, but when those 8th graders go to high school, baseball program, the high school baseball program loses some kids because they're going to do track, and that's totally fine. We want the kids. One of the things that we like to tell them as coaches is, at the end of the year, is play as many sports as you can. Don't just focus on one individual sport. My goal for these 30 kids when they get to high school is, if in the fall, play football, do golf or cross country. In the winter, you're either going to hopefully do basketball or wrestling. And in the spring, track or baseball. Just do as many sports as you can, because that's, you only get one chance to do it. But it's like with having 30 kids, trying to keep them interested, it's a challenge, but we're doing the best we can.
I don't know that we've ever actually talked about this. We've interviewed you on several different mediums, but tell people a little bit about your background when it comes to baseball. Where did you really first find a passion for the game, and tell people a little bit about your personal career?
Well, for me, baseball was always my passion when I was a kid. That was the sport. I always had a ball and glove out my hand. I would go out in the yard during the summer and play games, be in the St. Louis Cardinals, and I would do that every day. I remember one of my neighbors running into him a while back, and back when I was home visiting in Rushville, my parents, I ran into this person. He said, man, I just remember you as a kid, you were always outdoors, always playing baseball. And I think a lot of that had to do with my older brother too. He loved baseball. Watching his team, was a very good team he played for. Actually, Coach Don Bigley was his varsity baseball coach. So I grew up watching my brother play, and their team they were really good. And they having the opportunity to watch that, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it from, I remember being 6 years old, him going out and hitting ground balls to me in the yard. And I also remember being a 6th, 7th grader and stealing flour from my mom's kitchen so I could have baselines in the batter's box and everything. She wasn't too thrilled about. So it was, baseball was my passion all the way through. And then I ended up obviously playing ball at Rushville High School, and then went on to Lincoln College and played. And ended up finishing my career there. Ended up going to WIU, focusing on school. But baseball's always been close to my heart, and I've had a passion for it. Like, again, since I was probably, I can remember my brother and I playing in the yard when I was, 4 or 5 years old. So something I've always loved.
Lastly, how hard is it to be the athletic director and coach a sport at the same time? And how's the first couple of years of the athletic director's job been for you?
It's, the one nice thing about junior high baseball, it's such a quick season. We started August 5th, and we start regionals September, I think the week of September 14th. I think this is the day. So it's barely over a month. So it's a quick season. I really think fall, as the athletic director, fall's the easiest season to kind of manage. You don't have as many officials. You have to get, really, football is the only sport you have to hire officials for. Cross country and golf, they kind of run themselves. you obviously don't have as many snow outs or rain outs as we had last winter and last spring that don't have to worry about. So, I'm lucky enough to be able to coach right at the beginning of the year and then be done with it to where now I can focus all my attention on athletics the rest of the way. But I would say, as far as how the first 2 years are going, the second year has started off, and I'm knock on wood when I say this, 'cause I don't want to jinx myself, but it has been much smoother transition this year than last year. Last year was just a lot of things to learn, a lot of new things. Luckily, I have somebody like Brad Tomhaven building. I also, like we mentioned, Don Bigley earlier, who was the AD for a long time. Those are two people that I talk to a lot and get advice from as far as the AD duties go. So this second year is going a lot smoother, and hope it continues.
Well, Coach, hey, we wish you the best of luck the rest of the way throughout your season. We thank you for giving us a little bit of your time, and make sure you keep telling young Mr. Beckett Hines to keep throwing that ball left-handed.
That's right. Absolutely. Thank you for having me, guys.
All right, that's Jerred Hines, head baseball coach of the PCS Braves and also athletic director at Pittsfield High School. Really enjoy getting to speak with Jerred Hines on the topic of junior high baseball, get to learn a little bit more about his passion for baseball. I think that's what you find out on a lot of people that coach. The reason they coach is because it was something they used to really enjoy doing, and it gives them an opportunity to stay involved in the game. And, Jerred, not just because he's a friend, has done such a nice job of really becoming someone the kids really respect and really want to play for. Just has the right mentality for coaching kids that age.
I think he and Darren Craven, Brad Hamilton, and also Wade Smith really have done a nice job with them. And then junior high basketball, Darren will be the 8th grade coach. Brad will be the 7th grade coach. We were very blessed with those people. I really appreciate everything Jerred's doing. I'm glad he decided to stay here and take over the athletic director's job and junior high baseball. I think he misses junior high basketball a little bit. But I just want to tell you all, when you see him the next time, tell him that one thing you won't do is take him to a Cardinal baseball game, because Jared Hines has caused the Cardinals to lose more games. He went to Cincinnati with us, caused us to lose a game. You kind of proved the other day when you went to the game against Cincinnati that you could get the win without him. And so don't take him, and especially don't let him wear that light blue jersey he's got with what Willie McGee on the back.
That's right.
Because he is bad luck when it comes to the Cardinals.
Yeah.
But good luck as a member of the Sockies. Before we go any farther, I want to say to you and a lot of people that are involved, and if you're not involved in Socky Nation, get involved in Socky Nation. You guys have done a lot of great things. You had a run here not too awful long ago that was very successful. You really have supported a lot of different things. And that's one of the things I really want to stress to people is Socky Nation uses funds that they get raising money from the area. They sell popcorn and water at the productions for the fall and the spring theatrical programs that they're allowed to do, and have raised a lot of funds. And I mean, the totals that you guys have given away are astronomical.
Yep, and I think it's a good point that there's a lot of organizations that support their sports programs. Sometimes they're called boosters, sometimes they're, at Carrollton, the Hawk Pride group.
TAC Club at Beardstown, Tiger
Right.
Athletic Club.
The task force at Camp Point Central. I mean, I think there's just a lot of organizations like that. And when people let them do what really their role is, which is just supporting areas that there may not be funding for, right, readily available, I think that's when you see some good things happen. And, man, you start talking about some of the facilities, specifically on the football side, that have changed the last couple of years. I saw a picture of Minden Unity's football facility. And I can tell you, honestly, when I was playing high school football, we went to Minden, and this is, I don't say this in a negative light at all. It was not very nice. The lights weren't very bright. It was just kind of a crummy setup, and they weren't very good at that point.
It's really nice now.
It is tremendously nice. And, I think you have to give a lot of credit to the folks there. Frank Cash, the athletic director, I think has been a very positive influence in that community as well. But, you start looking there, Camp Point Central, whose field used to be where if you were standing on one side, you couldn't see the other side because there was.
And you'd find dead ducks because there was no duck marks, quite honestly.
There was the crown was so tall in the middle that you couldn't even see across.
You didn't want to be on the visitor side because you couldn't see for the first half because the sun was hitting you in the face so bad.
Now, I can remember a couple of years ago there was I don't know if it was a station out of Decatur or what it was. They said, man, this is nicer than like St. Teresa's setup. And, and it's a public school in the middle of a cornfield. at a very nice facility, and they've done some things to even make it a little better in this last couple of years with their new entryway, Brown County. I mean, just a lot of people out there working very, very hard to make sure their kids, and I hope kids are appreciative of that, because I'm going to tell you right now, you could play in some pretty cruddy settings, and we've seen some of those places, and the travels we've had over the years. So around here, people do a really nice job, and you can tell are very supportive overall of their young people.
Calhoun's got a great facility, and I want to shout out to Parker Zumwalt, because quite honestly, with a road grader a few years ago at the Glenn C. Smith Field, he changed the complexion of that football field. It was to the point where it was just nothing but mud towards the end of the season. He said, we need to level this off. And then Mid-USA Landscaping came out, Paul Petty, a lot of other people, the Prisoners and more. And now the grass is really looking sharp there. They do a lot nicer job lining the field. Get your parents involved there. And then one other thing, our broadcast wouldn't be here without the local businesses. So when you get ready to buy a car, buy groceries, buy T-shirts and hats, have a fundraiser, whatever, why don't you look in your community first before you go anywhere else, before you get on the internet, before you do anything else, and call those sponsors that help bring these broadcasts to you, and spend your money with the local people.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate the folks who are helping us bring the games to you. Speaking of that, this week, we'll have Pittsfield and Auburn on Central Illinois Sports live on YouTube, 7 o'clock start, pregame show at 6:30. We'll have all 9 of the Saki games this year, so we definitely encourage you to find that now, and obviously want you to come out to the home games if you want to go back later and listen to all the entertaining things that John and I say, or at least we thought they were entertaining. You can do that as well. And then you'll have Camp Point Central as they're on the road this week.
On the road at Winchester, Matt Coldus, a dear friend of mine, a young man that has led the football program in the youth levels for many years, is really doing a nice job. And I just want to say that I wish him the best of luck, and Adam Brockhouse the best of luck too. And I just thought while I was on that, 7 o'clock is their start time. You were right and I was wrong.
Can you say that one more time?
You're handsome, I'm not.
Yeah, you're good looking, I'm not attractive. All right.
Okay, but we'll be 7 o'clock, 6:30 game time on Central Sports. You can go there and get on mixlr.com, or else go to mixlr.com with the app. Join it, put your email address in there, and then go to Geared Up Broadcasting. You can hear it live also. We had a few technical difficulties last week. Charlie's going to help get me some of those fixed. But, man, we were able to bring you a couple of really good games, and looking forward to doing some more of that.
That we are, and we hope you enjoy the programs like this one. We hope you enjoy the different interviews we're trying to get out there throughout the week. We encourage you again to subscribe to the YouTube page, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. That helps us get our message out to you. And if you hit a share on one of those every once in a while, we'd appreciate it. At this point, Jack, I think we're about out of things to say. We can't even think of a name for the program, so I don't have anything catchy to say at the end of it either. So I guess what we'll say is thanks to Jerred Hines for joining us on his interview a little bit earlier. And we look forward to seeing you this Friday night with more high school football action on Central Illinois Sports.